designing one of Beijing's most astonishing projects. A massive titanium and glass dome, the largest dome ever constructed in China. 25,000 square meters of steel, nearly 30,000 square yards, without a single supporting column. Officially named the National Grand Theater, but universally known as the Egg.
The accident of the Charles de Gaulle Airport was a big shock, of course, for me. I was in China when it happened, and the first thing I did on the morning after is to go and see the client.
As French experts investigate the terminal's collapse, officials in Beijing wonder what their findings will mean for the Egg. But long before the Paris tragedy, the Egg's incredible design has inspired howls of protest and shouts of praise. Its shimmering dome floats on water like a mirage. Beneath the giant shell are 3 performance halls for theater, opera, and concerts. But strangely, it seems to have no doors.
There's no entrance, visible entrance, there's not.
To get inside the Egg, well-dressed opera buffs will have to go underwater. But they won't get wet. They'll descend into glass-roofed tunnels running underneath the Egg's surrounding lake and emerge into its spectacular interior.
Going to the opera is something ceremonial. You have to make a passage from the day-to-day activities.
Perhaps it's appropriate that a national theater inspires the same reactions as many of the world's most famous operas, symphonies, and plays. Either you love the Egg or you hate it.
Standing next to this thing, I defy anyone to not be moved by it. There's a weight to this thing that is just to be experienced.
A disaster. I have to use this word, a disaster, for the neighborhood.
To its critics, it looks like a spaceship has been dropped into our city.
Nothing upsets the Egg's critics more than its location. A stone's throw from China's architectural crown jewel, the fabled Forbidden City. And directly opposite China's icon of government, the Great Hall of the People.
The location of the National Theater, I think, is not so proper because it's so close to the Tiananmen Square. Tiananmen Square is, I think, the most important place in China.
The Forbidden City is one of the world's great works of design and architecture. Now you see over the golden roofs a large blob hovering, which is completely inappropriate.
The chorus of complaints doesn't go unnoticed. Officials decreed that the massive dome must be lower than its neighbor, the Great Hall of the People. This pleases the Egg's critics and worries its builders. Meeting the government's height restriction will mean digging a foundation of unprecedented size.
The theater's foundation is 32 meters deep. That's not only the deepest in Beijing, but in the whole country.
But only 18 meters, or 59 feet below Tiananmen Square, lies a layer of underground water. Excavating below it could buckle the ground under the hallowed buildings in Tiananmen Square, including the Great Hall of the People.
In order to dig that deep without disturbing the foundations of all buildings around Tiananmen Square, we had to both block and pump water while laying the foundation slab.
Workers run 28 pumps to siphon out more than 500,000 gallons of water every day. They install a concrete retaining wall to block water from entering the enormous excavation. After successfully laying the foundation, they seal the drainage wells and add a layer of crushed rock to help support the massive slab. Then they move on to the next challenge. erecting 148 arches inside China's biggest dome. A delicate task on a gargantuan scale. A 600-ton crane lifts the arches into position. But even it's not big enough to handle arches nearly 150 meters or 500 feet long. Workers must weld them together in 3 separate pieces. First, they erect a network of gigantic frames to give the arches temporary support. As the arches hang from the cranes, expert welders create seamless steel plates just inches wide, but strong enough to hold the enormous arches together.
After you've welded them together, the seam is as strong as anywhere else on the steel plate. It can take the same amount of stress. We call this a grade 1 weld.
Engineers test the welded seams with ultrasound. The slightest defect could have catastrophic consequences. Then, the ultimate test. Removing the temporary arch supports. As soon as they're supporting themselves, the arches will drop. If they fall too far, the dome's shape will distort.
往下呢，我们从理论计算上是16公分。
On paper, we calculated that the arches would sink up to 16 centimeters. So we deliberately built them 10 centimeters
把它
higher.
提高了10公分，100毫米。
150 workers take positions around the dome. Slowly, they jack down the supports. The arches drop into their final position. And the dome drops with them.
最后的结果，它拆除以后，实际的下降，它是120。
In the end, it fell 12 centimeters, a difference of only 4 centimeters from our calculation. Just the length of the tip of my finger.
说白了，就一个手指末大小。
Believe it or not, the egg builder's next challenge is even more daunting. They have to install each of the dome's 20,000 panels by hand. And doing that will be even harder than it looks. Because each panel matches only one other panel on the opposite side of the dome. So workers can't just install 20,000 panels. They have to place every one of those panels in exactly the right location. It's not a job for the weak or the timid. While balancing themselves on narrow rails along the edge of the dome, workers hoist every panel hand over hand to its exact position. And even when they've put all the panels in place, they'll face one more challenging task.
每一塊鈦板由白色嘅保護膜。
Each titanium panel is covered with a protective
呢
membrane.
個安裝程序。
Before the egg opens, dozens of workers must scramble over its dome, peeling the membrane off thousands of panels, revealing the shiny titanium beneath. Building the egg would be hard enough under ideal circumstances. But after the Paris airport tragedy, nervous officials closely monitor every aspect of the dome's construction until investigators announce the terminal's design didn't cause its collapse.
The client issued a press message saying they were confident in me, that there was no reason for any stop, and there was not half an hour stop.
As the egg nears completion, Paul and Drew hopes that all of Beijing will embrace it, and that the controversy it's inspired will fade away.
Building an opera for an architect is an enormous chance. I don't think such a project could be made now in another part of the world. I mean, it requires a lot of hope, of pride, of vision of the future.
The success of the egg may have paved the way for some of Beijing's other daring Olympic projects. A radical idea for the new swim center gets a surprisingly positive response.